Hi, it's Kerry-Ann from the Science Booth. How are you doing today? Right, well, have you got a camera? Okay, this is my very special camera. This is a SLR camera. You might have a camera that looks like this, a little digital camera, or I'm sure your grown-ups have got cameras that they have on their phones. It's really handy that we can take cameras round with us wherever we go today. Now, all cameras kinda need the same things to work. And one of the main things that we need for a camera to work, apart from all the glass and the lenses and the mechanisms, is light. No cameras would work if we didn't have light. And what we're going to do today is I'm going to show you how to make two different types of camera. I'm going to show you one using a Pringles tube, and I'm going to show you one just using a regular sort of toilet roll tube or kitchen roll tube, or even just literally a cardboard tube. Okay, so we're going to have a little think about our cameras and how they work. So the lenses in a camera, they refract the light, make the light change direction so it can focus on different things. And the first cameras weren't even cameras at all. They were just big rooms, and these rooms were called camera obscuras. What a cool word. Now the word camera obscura literally means dark chamber. And what they were rooms. They had a hole in the wall on the outside. The light would pass through and project an image on the wall on the inside. So camera obscura, dark chamber. And we still use the term camera today. So we don't need a dark room, but we do need a dark area in our camera. And what we're going to do is we're going to make a pinhole camera, and that's kind of a small version of the camera obscura rooms. So we've already said that all cameras need light to work. So the first thing that we're going to make on our pinhole camera is something called the aperture. An aperture just means opening, and we need a very small hole on our camera. And we're going to use, if you're using the Pringles tube first, we're going to use the metal end of the Pringles tube. Now definitely get your grown-up to help you with any difficult cutting or making the hole for your camera. So we're going to make the aperture, and I'm going to try and get it in about the centre. You can measure it if you're going to be super scientific. I'm going to use a little push pin, okay, just what you'd use to pin a notice up on, or you can use a needle if you're just using something else, but you can go for it. So I'm just going to push this in. There we go. It actually goes through really easily. Okay, so you've got to try and get that hole through as neatly and as smoothly as possible, because if that hole ends up being quite rough around the edges, that's going to scatter the light or refract the light, and we want the light to be travelling in straight lines. So I don't know how well you can see that, but we've got our hole in the centre of our metal part. Okay, so that's called the aperture, and you can see it's quite small. It's literally our pinhole for the pinhole camera. Now, the smaller the hole of the aperture, the crisper or the sharper our image will be. And what do I mean by that? I mean the edges of the image. So if you squint your eyes a little bit, everything seems a little bit blurred. If you open them and look properly, everything's crystal clear, nice and sharp. So the smaller the hole, the sharper the image. However, the bigger the hole, we're going to get a less sharp image. It'll be more blurry, but it will let more light in, which will also let more colour in. So you'll have a more colourful, lighter image. So it's kind of a fine balance between letting in enough light and the image not being blurry. And this is a really good point in the investigation that you can investigate and explore different sort of areas. So if you've got lots of materials, you could have a go at making lots of different cameras. Like I could make several. If you've only got one Pringles tube and one go at this, I'd start with the smallest hole possible and then make the hole a little bit larger later on and see what you can find out. Okay, so a fine balance between letting enough light in and the image being sharp and having enough colour and things. Now in early cameras, this problem was overcome by having a long exposure. Now what do I mean by that? The exposure is the time that the aperture is open. In our Pringles tube, it's always open, okay? But in real cameras, the aperture kind of opens and then closes. Okay? Now in old-fashioned cameras, that used to stay open for such a long time to let all the light in, to expose the film, to get the image. And I always wondered why people on really old-fashioned photographs would be sat there like this. And I was thinking, what is wrong with all those black and white people? Why are they so miserable? But actually, it's because they had to sit there for rather a long time. Have you tried holding a smile for 3 minutes? It's kind of difficult. So actually, they had to hold a pose that they could sit there for a little while. So my kind of resting pose would look like this. Not very happy, is it? So I'm kind of glad that we've got cameras that have apertures that open quickly, let lots of light in, and we can smile on our photographs. Okay, so the next thing we need to do is we need to think about our field of view. Now, our field of view is how much of the image is going to appear in our photograph. So if you have a small field of view, that would be a small image. The bigger that becomes, the bigger our field of view, the bigger the image. And the way we change that in our pinhole camera is going to be the distance from the aperture to the screen. We've not even got the screen in yet, but we'll talk about that in a minute. Okay, so if we have a small, it's called focal length, the distance from the aperture to the screen. If we have a small focal length, we have a wide field of view. If we have a long focal length, we're going to have a smaller field of view, and we're going to do that by deciding where we cut our Pringles tube. Now, I'm going to recommend cutting it at about anywhere between 1/4 and 1/3, and in fact I'm going to chop it across this line here, so you'll see that in a minute. So when our cameras zoom in and out, that's them changing their focal length. Now, we can't change that in our Pringles tube. It's going to be a fixed focal length, okay? But you can decide where it's going to go. And if you want, you can kind of experiment with that as well. Now, what I would do, I'm going to take the lid off for now. To make this as neat as possible, you can kind of use a ruler to mark all the way around your Pringles tube and get a good sort of nice straight line that you're going to cut. So I'm doing mine at about 6 centimetres, but honestly, it doesn't matter. You can do it 6 centimetres, 5 centimetres, 10 centimetres, whatever you like. So I put little marks all the way around, just in an effort to make this fairly neat. But I'm doing this with you guys real time, so this might not be so neat. Now, I'm using a very sharp craft knife, so if you've got grown-ups helping you, this is definitely a grown-up sort of job. So I'm just going to pop that in, and I'm going to kind of saw around my Pringles tube. So if you're not getting a grown-up to help you do this, go and find one. And grown-ups, if you are doing this, mind your fingers. Okay, I always tell the children to mind themselves, but actually it's usually the grown-ups that end up injuring themselves. Right, so I'm just cutting around here now. So you can see this is possible to do in quite a short amount of time. If you've not got a crafting knife, you can actually do this with scissors. You just need to kind of poke them in to get started, or even use a pin to get that started. So I'm just cutting all the way around. I'm sure you will do a more neater job than this. I've already had a go at making several of these, and this probably won't be my neatest, but you know what? It'll still work. Just going to cut that last little bit off. There we go. Okay, so I'm going to put that away somewhere safely, lay it away. And now I've got my Pringles tube with the metal bit with the aperture at one end and the other bit at this end. I'm going to peel off this. It means you get to eat some Pringles if you're allowed. Okay, so we've got this long end here and we've got this short end here. Okay, so I said the focal length is to do with the aperture and where the screen is going to be, and our screen is going to be here. I've done this about 1/4 of the way along. Now, you're going to use some baking paper to make your screen, okay, and you can draw around the lid of your Pringles tube or just your cardboard tube. And then what I'm going to do, this is why I like the Pringles tubes for making a pinhole camera, because you can just use the different parts of the Pringles tube. So I'm going to literally use the lid to hold the screen in place. So I'm going to pop my baking paper on top of the tube. I'm going to pop the lid on. Okay, and there we go. We've got our baking paper on. This is like the mini tubs of Pringles, isn't it? And I'm just going to get a little bit of tape to secure that in place. I've pre-cut some tape ready. I'm just going to get 2 little pieces of that tape to stick it in place. Okay, we'll just chop that there. There we go, brilliant. So I'm just going to pop that on and stick it in place. You don't want to put too much. You don't want to put too much tape going like across your lid. You want to try and keep that nice and clear for the light. So I've just put a little bit of tape on either edge, and we've got that there. So we've got our aperture, our hole that the light's going to pass through, and we've got our screen on the back here. Okay, now we kind of need to put it together. We need to put it together in the right order. So aperture, screen, the rest of the tube. Okay, so I'm going to pop that on here, and I'm going to tape that all together, and then we'll talk about the rest of it. So I'll get my pre-cut tape so it didn't make lots of noise. I'm just going to do this probably quite roughly. You guys could spend some time doing this rather neatly. Okay, and what you could also do as well is I will totally decorate the tube. Okay, you could paint it up and put some little camera images on or anything like that. Okay, so there we go. We've got essentially our sort of camera obscura. But what you'll find is when you look through this end, I can see lots of light coming in from these gaps here. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to cover this with tin foil, because not only does it make it look cool, okay, it just stops any light from coming in. Okay, it reflects any light on the outside, and any light that's bouncing around on the inside, it will kind of reflect that back in. So kitchen foil is fab for this little job here. Okay, I think I called it kitchen foil, but I might have said tin foil. And the word tin foil is one of my little pet peeves, because it's not made of tin, is it? It's made of aluminium. So kitchen foil is usually made of aluminium. Tin foil would actually be quite expensive. So I've just kind of covered my whole Pringles tube. You don't have to cover the full tube. You can just cover where the crack is going all around. And like I said, you can then go on to decorate the rest of the tube. I'm just going to fold this in at the end. And then that's much better. I'm going to have a go at using my Pinhole camera. Now, the best place to use this is probably outside, okay, on a nice bright day. But if it's a miserable rainy day, I would go and sit near a window, and you can point this out of your window. So you're going to cover or close one eye, and you're going to look through it. If you point it somewhere quite bright, you should see an image being projected onto your screen in there. And what you'll notice about the image is that the image is upside down, and that's because the way the lights come in and it's projecting an upside down image. If you have a look on the worksheet, that's explained really well. And that's kind of how all cameras work. But cameras usually have a mirror inside. So my digital camera here probably does it digitally, but cameras that don't, they'll have a mirror inside to flip that image the right way around, just like your brain does. So when an image comes in through your pupils and hits the back of your retina, that message gets sent to your brain. Everything would seem upside down. Your brain actually processes that image and flips it the right way around, so everything that we see is the right way around. And that's what you'll notice in here. Now, you can't flip the image unless you start adding mirrors and getting really fancy. But what I would say is if you can take a photograph through here, once you're pointing it at a bright, well-lit area, you can take a photograph, and then you can flip the image once you've taken the photograph on your phone or other camera. But what's really good is just going kind of observing things with the tube, okay? So yeah, the image will be upside down. And another thing to think about is when you move left or right, which way does your image move? What do you notice? And if you're looking through and your image looks quite blurry, then you can move closer or further away. And this is like focusing the camera so we can get like a better image. Now I'm quickly going to show you how to make a simpler version with your toilet roll tube. So I'm just going to do that now. So same sort of method again, you're going to cut about 1/4 to 1/3 around your toilet roll tube. I'm just going to do this quite quickly. Again, be careful, my blade is a bit wonky donkey. Let's have a look. And I've not drawn a line around here, so we could end up with a very wonky pinhole camera indeed. Let's have a look. So we're chopping about 1/3 to 1/4 off. Let's keep cutting. I'm just going to show you how to do this little version, because if you've not got a Pringles tube handy, most people will have a toilet roll tube, a kitchen roll tube, or you'll be able to make a tube out of cardboard. So we've got our 2 ends here. Again, if you draw around your toilet roll tube, you can make a circle. I've actually added little tabs just to make this a little bit easier to stick on. So I've pre-cut that already. So I've cut some little tabs. I'll stick that on shortly. But the first thing you need to do is you need to make your pinhole. So we've got some kitchen foil, and I said earlier that you need to make sure when you make your hole through your Pringles tube or foil that you make it nice and smoothly. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my foil into a piece of card, just because it's going to help me get my pinhole nice and smooth. So I've put my put my kitchen foil into some card. I'm going to push my pin through. It just means you get a slightly smoother hole going through. Just make sure you don't stab yourself. There we go. And it just helps make sure that your tin foil, kitchen foil, doesn't rip. Okay, so I've got my tin foil there. I'm going to pop that on. Right, let's have a look. I'm going to pop that on the edge. There we go. I'll just show you that in a second. I'm doing this very quickly. You can spend a bit more time doing it. So you can see I've got my hole in the kitchen foil there. I want it on the short end. There we go. Got my kitchen foil on the little end. Okay, I'm just going to fold that back out of the way. I'm going to get my baking paper. I'm just going to cut a few bits of tape again. And I've got tabs this time, so I'll be able to hold my baking paper in place. Pop that on. Again, like I said, you'll have much more time to do this than me. I'm getting in a bit of a tangle. Let's have a look. So we've got one on there. And we'll stick one on the other end, but I'm going a little bit fast. You can do this a little bit neater. Marvellous. Like I said, totally neaten this up. So you've got your bit of baking paper on the end there. You can add your tube on again and take that all the way round. I'll do that now. And then again, you can get the finished products going really quickly. There will obviously be photographs on the worksheet. So I'll just pop that round here. And the neater you can get everything, and the neater everything's lined up, the better your finished product will be. Okay, so this is a very, very rough one. So I've got my pinhole at the end, my screen in the middle, and this here. And you can look through. Oh, I'm already getting some light coming through that one. Now what I would say, obviously you can cover that again to make it a more darkened tube. But you can also, if you roll up some black card or dark card, you can add this as a bit of an extra eyepiece and pop that in the end to make this even better and even darker. And my top tip is, whether you're outside or inside at your window, get yourself under a blanket to cut out even more of the light, because you want this as close to your eye as possible, and then you get a really good image. There'll be more top tips on the worksheet. Thanks guys, bye.